Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dan Sweet. I'm with Helicopter Association International, and welcome to our weekly or bi-weekly HAI at Work webinar. If some of you had come on earlier and I had to kick you off, it's because we did have some technical issues getting people in the door. If you were on and waiting, I do apologize if you had to come back on. I will also apologize. My video is a little bit off today, a little bit unusual. I'm actually in Anaheim. You guys may be aware of our HAI Heli Expo, and it's about 4 months away. So we are in Anaheim right now doing some planning sessions. Aside from that, today's webinar is Ask an Aviation Attorney. Some of you may have been with us on some of our previous webinars where we've had Sarah, and these are always fascinating, and there's plenty of information for people to learn. So let's go ahead and introduce Sarah. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to fight with two different screens that the technology has still decided it's not want to help me with. So Sarah is the managing member of Obadal, Filler, McLeod, and Klein, and is a founder and executive director of the Aeronautical Repair Station, also known as ARSA. She's been on several of our webinars before, and she's advocated for individuals and companies on international aviation safety, law, policy, and compliance issues since the 1980s. Probably one of the reasons I like her is she's from the Pacific Northwest, or at least attended school in the Pacific Northwest, earned her bachelor's degree at Evergreen State College in Olympia, and a law degree from Catholic University of America. Brett Lovato, you probably won't see much of Brent today, but you will hear him. He works with Sarah, and he's going to provide some of the boilerplate material for Sarah before she gets started with her presentation. I guess I missed the slide, so I'm going to tell you right now. In fact, I'm just going to stop sharing before I go too much further with it. Our webinars are interactive. We want to make sure that you have a chance to ask questions. We were soliciting questions through Rotor Daily, but if you want to ask Sarah a question today during the Q&A session, please use the question module that's either on the bottom or the side of your Zoom screen. You feel free to go ahead and chat using the chat feature. We will pay attention to it, but we're going to focus on the questions from the question module first. So please, anytime during the presentation, if you have a question you want Sarah to answer at the end, please go ahead and put it in there, and we'll get that in the queue. Our webinars are being recorded. Legal matters aside, we always make these available to anybody who can't watch them live. We do try to get these posted by the following afternoon. If we can't get it by the following afternoon, sometimes it'll be the following Monday. But we do try to get these up on our webinar and our website and our YouTube channel. So that said, please allow me to introduce Sarah McLeod. Sarah, would you bring your camera up?
Up at the same time, and hopefully, okay, so the camera came up and went off again. Hi guys. I kind of look like my picture.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a beautiful shot. So, hey, we're glad you were able to join us again today. I know that you have some things you want to discuss before we get to the point of asking an aviation attorney, which we deeply appreciate. I also want to emphasize the fact that Sarah's kind of been the leading force behind our new HAI Legal Services Directory. And so maybe you'll be able to touch a little bit on that for us at some point today too, Sarah. I'm going to turn off my camera and get out of your way before any of my more technology issues cause more problems. And I'll just let you go and I'll be here in the background.
All right. Hopefully you're seeing my screen. Nope, you're seeing the wrong screen. So let me stop sharing and start that one again.
Pay no attention to the screen behind the curtain.
Pay no attention to the screen behind you.
Today has not been our best technology day, so.
Well, one of these days, you know, I always make the excuse of this because I'm over 65 and I don't really understand much of this technology. My disembodied voice is Brett Lovato. He's always really good at running us through these initial slides of who we are and what we do. He'll also help us with the legal resources that are available now to HAI members that we are pretty proud of, because Brett did most of this work behind the scenes with HAI, behind the scenes people, so that you will all have these references available for your own research, because there's nothing like personal knowledge when you're dealing with, especially when you're dealing with a local aviation safety inspector or a local government agency. So Brett, I hope you can see my screen. Take it away.
Yeah, I can. So Dan did a lovely job giving some basic introduction to Sarah, but I do want to make sure everyone has a background on a few key things as we launch into how we've planned out this session. The first is that you heard Sarah's organization, which duly has her name in it as a managing member, Obadal, Filler, McLeod and Klein PLC. The firm has been working with HAI in many different ways for years, but particularly in the past 14 months, helping stand up those legal resources, and not just stand up, but put legs underneath those legal resources available to HAI members. So if nothing else, and we'll try to get copies of these slides where there are hyperlinked access to the various resources, if nothing else, get onto rotor.org, go through the member benefits section of the web page and find HAI legal resources. You'll see a number of things there, including a continually developing legal directory and a page of webinars and growing opportunity for legal experts to provide commentary and editorial resources and instruction, and our child of Sarah and my development of resources, our regulatory research guide, which is kind of a key primer for you in dealing with regulatory compliance here in the United States, and also understanding how compliance works no matter where you happen to land. So those resources were developed by HAI in conjunction with assistance from the law firm, and that is the voice through which Sarah is coming with you today. On the next slide, you'll see another important organization, which is, Dan mentioned, the Aeronautical Repair Station Association. ARSA itself is a close partner with HAI. It is a trade association focusing specifically on approved maintenance organizations and repair stations, but as we like to say in the training we provide at Heli Expo through the law firm, the regulatory chain really guides the life cycle of airworthiness, and that life cycle includes design, production, operations, and maintenance, and ARSA represents entities from across that chain. You already heard Sarah's bio. Here it is for you in written form, because lawyers love to do everything in writing. On the next slide, you'll see a very important notification for this particular session, and that is that a training session like this, an open discussion, is information that's provided for educational and informational purposes, but it does not constitute legal advice. We encourage you, for specific legal counsel, to seek it out. The law firm provides that to its clients, and maybe could provide that service to you. But in the context of training, the application of material is always dependent on particular facts. In fact, Sarah has a great plan for this session. She's actually going to walk through a question that we got before the session, not to provide an answer, though there are answers involved in the context, but instead to show you how to work through, how an expert works through these kinds of questions. Because as you probably will experience, should you get to ask a direct one of Sarah, her response will always begin, almost always, with, well, it depends, followed by a bunch of information related to how an expert and how you can make the determination on just exactly how it does depend. So here's our description for the session. We kindly stole it directly from the marketing people at HAI, who did a lovely job putting together the basic concept for this session. And now that we've reached it, I can let Sarah take it away and give you kind of that overview. And before I let Sarah take it away, let me just give you a little bit of background regarding these tools. So we talk a lot about civics. Sarah will quote to you with slight changes in the statistics, the percentage of Americans here in the United States who cannot name the 3 branches of government. I have taken that to heart. So as my daughter, who's 10 years old, has been falling asleep each night, I've given her a kiss, told her I loved her, and said, name the 3 branches of government. And she's gotten pretty good at saying the legislative, executive, and judicial. I have not yet begun to ask her which branch the FAA falls under, but of course, hopefully you know out there that it's part of the executive branch of the US government. Understanding that civics is the first layer of armor you give yourself to avoid getting into trouble. You'll see that link for advocacy resources is related to the work that HAI is doing on your behalf, getting engaged on key issues of policy, regulatory development, legislative advocacy in terms of making good on behalf of the entire rotorcraft industry. So we want you to be aware of the things your trade association is doing for you. And then nothing is more important, particularly in the terms of US regulatory compliance, than getting into the Code of Federal Regulations. Our government has created a remarkably useful tool, the electronic CFR, the eCFR, which you should bookmark Title 14 because it will help you get quickly to the source material you need to answer aviation regulatory questions. But as businesses, there are actually issues throughout the Code of Federal Regulations, from OSHA to drug and alcohol testing to employment requirements. Those are all things that you can find regulatory resources for through the government in the Code of Federal Regulations. So with those things said, and so Sarah can provide a little bit of context as we transition into the rest of the webinar, now I think, Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That is part of the prophylactic lawyering that we try to instill in all lawyers and non-lawyers. When a businessman has to hire a lawyer, he is really on the opposite side of where he needs to be in business negotiations, and sometimes it's the same thing with the government. But what we're trying to point out here, especially in that second bullet under the advocacy efforts that HAI puts in, is that's the board of directors. The legislative branch is basically the board of directors for the agency. It may be an executive branch agency, and it may report to the president, and all of the administrators serve at the pleasure of the president. No matter how many years in a term, we all want to brag about the fact that the FAA administrator is appointed for a 5-year term, but the new president could very easily come in and say, it's not my pleasure that you serve in that position anymore, and basically force a resignation, because it is an appointed position. The president appoints it, and the Congress, the Senate, as you know, may or may not approve the president's choice. So it's really important that you understand that the legislative branch has been micromanaging the agency for quite some time, and some of the things that we do in regulations or have subsequently been put into regulations started with the law. The easiest one for me to remember is the law that said that an installer of a supplemental type certificate had to have permission from the STC holder for the installation. That's a law. It doesn't matter whether or not the FAA may enforce it, but it's actually a law that requires that rather than a regulation. And it's important to know the difference. It's important to know when a regulation is driven by a statute, because they have to answer to that. Look, one of the reasons I put up what's a legal question is because 90% of the time when I'm asked a question, and you'll see it in the question that we're going to go through that the gentleman presented, the question that the lay person is asking isn't necessarily the question they need answered, because the law isn't often helpful. It is an edge upon which you must determine how you are going to show compliance, especially in a compliance-driven regulations like the FAA has, right? And anybody that's looked at Part 23 can see that why some of us beg the agencies to give us prescriptive rules rather than here's how I can comply any way that I want to, except if I go to the FAA with the wrong information, then they're going to say that doesn't comply. So that there's a double-edged sword when we talk about performance-based rules versus prescriptive rules. The most recent example of changing from a performance-based or prescriptive rule to a performance-based rule was the flammability testing that they used to have on fixed-wing aircraft here's how high the flame has to go and all of that sort of stuff. Well, they cut that out because of some of the new technology and the new materials don't require exactly the same kind of testing. And also there are other industries that have fire tests that are the same or even more stringent than what we have in aviation, and that should be acceptable. The other thing that you have to be careful of is when you come to an aviation lawyer with a non-aviation question, that person should be referring you to somebody else in the area of expertise they have. It's just like, you know, I don't know, pilot ratings, right? Type ratings versus general ratings versus class ratings and things like that. Lawyers don't know everything. And if they act like they do, then they better have a big law firm behind them, or they better be able to refer you, and they ought to be able to explain to you what you should be taking to that other lawyer so that that person can give you the best advice in the best way. So that the HAI directory, lawyer directory, breaks things into aviation-centric and general business areas just for that reason. Of course, you would love to have a general business lawyer that had some idea what it meant to comply with, you know, 14 CFR, but they don't know how to comply with OSHA usually, and they don't know how to comply with the EPA rules or the hazmat rules or any of the other regulations that are going to impact your business at one time or another. So what kind of expertise do you need and when do you need it is very important. So understanding what your problem is. The first question I always ask people, or I happen to know because I'm an industry representative through ARSA, is this an industry problem? You may think it's an industry problem, but your fellow colleagues may be perfectly happy with the way something is. You got to be able to really decipher what is an industry problem. And of course, if you believe it's an industry problem in HAI, then go and see if HAI has got some finger on the pulse of it, or ARSA, or NBAA, or the Chamber of Commerce, for Christ's sake. Find out from these lobbyists and people that have supposedly have their the pulse of either Congress or the Federal Aviation Administration or EASA, and test it out. And then the next question, is it regulations or is it contract? Does a contract require you to follow regulations? Like a lot of firefighting contracts say, comply with 135. Well, you may not be operating under 135, but the contract says you have to comply with 135. Will the FAA be able to enforce that? Maybe or maybe not. It may just be a contract requirement. So you've got to have some knowledge of your problem and some understanding of who you may need to go to. And of course, I always suggest doing your own research, right? Here's your resources from HAI. What about talking to a colleague? Heck, what about talking to the board, one of the board members at HAI? Hey, is this brought up? Is this being discussed? Is this something that would be of interest? How are you handling this situation? Doesn't mean that you're going to follow that advice. It means that you're gathering information. And if you have to go to a lawyer, then we're praying that you, first of all, start recommending that lawyers get their profile in the HAI directory so that others can enjoy their expertise, and use that directory or your HAI colleagues to find a lawyer that may be able to talk to you, right? It breaks it down, this directory breaks it down by state, because if it's a contract situation, you're going to have to find a lawyer in that state usually, or you're going to have to look at your contract and see which state laws apply. And you're going to have to talk to a lawyer in that state. They can make a federal case or what have you if it's litigation is required, but focus on your state. Focus on the practice area. Go to the website of the law firm. Go to similar websites. Do a Google search. There's plenty of people that claim to be aviation lawyers, but they may be just litigating accidents. But if they're on not the victim side, but the operator side, you would need to talk to them. You may even, if it's not a conflict, talk to the victim side to say, what are you bringing up? That allows you to figure out how to put in mitigation against those types of attacks. I don't think that there's anything that stops you from getting sued, but it may help you get out of the suit faster, may be able to focus your attention on the best litigator to hire. All right. And the HAI directory, again, breaks it down into general business or aviation specific. And it's true, and it's my fault if you want to blame me, that aviation directory talks about the parts of the regulation. Are you in operations 91? Are you in operations 133? You need to know this about yourself so that you can provide that to the lawyer. Because if they don't know what part 133 is, go to another lawyer if you're looking for an aviation-centric lawyer. Please don't be rushed into making a decision. Make sure you interview them. If you call me, I interview you as much as you interview me, because I need to understand your situation and whether I'll be worth a dang. If I'm not going to be worth anything, I may suggest that you go to another expert, maybe even a tax accountant, right? Not everything needs to be handled by a lawyer. And I understand that the last people you want to call are lawyers because you think that the dollar signs appear in our eyes the minute we pick up the phone. Some of us are like that. I'm not going to deny that. My husband wishes I was more like that. But I'm in this profession to help people stay out of trouble. HAI doesn't like me to say this, but I'm a prophylactic lawyer. And if you don't know what that means, I hope you don't have teenagers. I don't like to see you get in trouble. I like to try to make sure that you understand the return on investment that a lawyer should give you. And I will remind you that 99% of the time, unless you are involved in criminal activity, I am only there to advise you. I am not there to tell you what to do. I am there to give you the positive and negative of any approach you may take. And if you're already in trouble, I try to devise the best defense. And I will also tell you, like in a drug and alcohol case, if you bring me a drug and alcohol testing case, my husband calls that shooting fish in the barrel for the FAA, because you have to keep all of the records that are going to shoot you in the foot if you have missed something. You haven't sought out the employer of your safety sensitive person, previous employers in an early enough time. There's just steps that you are supposed to take and keep paperwork to prove you took them. So if you don't have the paperwork, you're in trouble. And if you do have the paperwork and it has the wrong dates on it, you're in trouble. But that doesn't mean that you have to confess and pay huge civil penalties. It means that you need to be aware of those obligations and understand what the government can and cannot ask you. So sound legal counsel is based on facts, not feelings. And the lawyer may be very harsh, but you need to hear some of those things. Otherwise, you can invest a lot of money and really come up with the wrong conclusion. All right, I don't know how much time I've spent or we've spent, but here's the question. And I'm really very thankful to the gentleman who sent it in, because public aircraft operations are, as he said, ever ambiguous. And he's asking a question about, the first question is fairly simple to answer, and we're going to go through it. You don't have to read it really, really quick. This is the entire question that was submitted, and now we're going to go through the first part of it. So he's saying that the FAA guidance that focuses on contractors to government agencies rather than government agencies themselves when they're talking about operating public aircraft operations. He asked whether we should be freely interchanging a contractor with the government. The answer is not only no, but HELL no. These words are really, really important. And we are known in aviation circles, or at least my 40 years in aviation has taught me, we are sloppy with words. We call maintenance MRO, right? Maintenance, repair, and overhaul. What maintenance includes repair and overhaul, if you look at the definition. What happened to alteration? If I only have a contract for MRO, does that mean I can't do alterations? So the same thing with advisory circulars or anything from the FAA. Words are important. It's probably one of the reasons that 50% of us get divorced is because we use the wrong words. So no, government agents are agencies that own and operate aircraft are treated differently than contractors to government agencies. And not only that, if you are a contractor to a state agency, it's going to be different regulations or different requirements than a federal agency. There's two things you have to keep firmly in mind, and you'll be able to read this slide more thoroughly. I'm not going to read it to you, but you have to keep two things firmly in mind. The first thing is that the aircraft has to qualify. If you're a contractor, the aircraft has to qualify as a public aircraft. And like I said, there's exclusive use requirements for states and counties that may not be applicable for the federal government. We have a whole series on our rset.org website on public aircraft operations, right? Public aircraft and public aircraft operations. Generally, if the aircraft generally is owned and operated by the government agency, it is a public aircraft. But not every flight is a public aircraft operation. The public aircraft operation is a bit of a moving target. For instance, if I'm the city of XYZ and I want to fly my mayor to a ribbon cutting ceremony, there's legal opinions out there from the FAA that says that's not a legitimate government function. So that means it's going to be operated under 91. Do you see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? We can't use words interchangeably if they mean different things. The next question that the gentleman focuses on is this transfer of control, because in the guidance material, the FAA points out that there are operational aspects of a public aircraft operation being conducted by a contractor that will not be overseen by the FAA. The operation has to comply with air traffic control, but there are operations, obviously, public aircraft operations that don't qualify under 91. That's why we fight about this all of the time. All that means is, say it's the U.S. Forest Service, and it says you have to comply with not just 133, but 135, even though the aircraft wouldn't be able to be put on a 135 certificate, wouldn't be able to be operated under that certificate. The quality standard or the training of the pilots or what have you for those operations have to meet 135. Do you understand that? That doesn't mean that the FAA is going to be overseeing, because it's not a 135 operation. That's what it means by this transfer of responsibility. Since the gentleman or people that wrote the advisory circular probably didn't understand the convoluted law that has been created in and around public aircraft, is why they have these poor choices of words. I really recommend either come to the public aircraft training that HAI has put on every year with colleagues of mine. My husband is one of them. He is the public aircraft guru. One of the reasons he is because he used to be up on Capitol Hill, so he knows how to read laws, even badly written ones, and translate them into doable or defendable positions from the agency. I mean, the agency's guidance has other kind of a little that the government agency has to openly declare that it's a public aircraft operation. Marshall will tell you, that's not what the law says. A public aircraft operation is a public aircraft operation. If the Forest Service doesn't understand that it is conducting one when it is conducting one, I don't know that that declaration has to be made. Should it be made so that the Forest Service and the contractor understand who's in charge of what flights? Absolutely. But as you know, the government is reluctant to put anything on itself that is equivalent to what it puts on its citizens. So we probably won't get there from here. I hope, and if the gentleman that sent the question in has had time to read it, or we can send a summary of it back to him or what have you, Dan, that would be great. Otherwise, if he's got questions, because I am not watching the question pane, if he's got questions or if he's got further questions, I would certainly welcome them to, text it to us directly or what have you from the information on the bottom. The last slide that
Sarah, there's no follow-up at this point. Thank you, though.
Okay, perfect. The last thing that I wanted to point out, because the final, it's kind of like 3 questions. So even when that responsibility transfers from the FAA to your government contractor, you're the contractor. So the government that contracted with you, not every operation is going to be a public aircraft operation. So if you are doing maintenance during or after or before a public aircraft operation, of course, make an entry that complies with 43.9, because it has to be airworthy when it's flying under 91. So to the maintenance provider, it may make no difference whatsoever whether it's a public aircraft operation, or whether it's exclusively going to be used for public aircraft operations for 90 days. On day 91, it's not going to be under contract anymore. It's going to have to come under 91. So why would you change the way you made maintenance entries or any of the other requirements of 14 CFR while it was assigned to be overseen by another agency? And besides that, guys, I don't know any other agency that doesn't say the maintenance has to be done in accordance with 14 CFR. So I think that that's a practical approach. There are times when it's impossible to take that practical approach because there are some configurations that are only viable in public aircraft operations. That's usually a government-owned aircraft that is in that kind of a configuration. Most of the time when the government contracts with an operator to fly public aircraft operations, they also require the aircraft to be airworthy before it comes in and after it goes out. So don't forget practical answers. Again, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I might even be able to defend you if you didn't make the maintenance entry or the logbook entry or what have you, because it was a public aircraft operation. But it's kind of hard to say, all right, I'm going to make that entry now. The agency may require you to redo the work. So just keep up with it. That's the pragmatic approach to some of these questions and some of the requests, demands that the agency may lay on us, just because they can. So here's the practical answer, is that if the aircraft has an airworthiness certificate issued by the FAA, do the work in accordance with 40, I think he meant 43, 14 CFR Part 43. And make your maintenance entries that way. I'm going to leave it here for just a few seconds, Dan, because I think this finalizes the answer to the gentleman's question. And either when this webinar goes on demand, or like I said, we can get the answer to the gentleman.
I will share it with him. Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate it.
Okay, so Dan asked me to kind of touch on a hot topic, and it was kind of a perfect example of how many experts are you going to need if you are one of the pilots that got accused of illegally maintaining either the disability payments and or lied on their medical that they didn't have, supposedly, allegedly lied on their medical that, you know, they didn't have any issues when they were getting disability from the VA for issues that they should have reported. That's what the news media is reporting. Let me just say that I don't know my elbow from other bodily parts either about VA benefits, because that's really the first foray, right? Is, are you rightfully receiving VA benefits? Or at least that's the direction I would go, because that's the money that you're receiving. Of course, you're also receiving money supposedly as a pilot. So the pilot, did you in fact mislead the agency or what have you, may be fairly cut and dry, and you may be able to get you would go to an aviation lawyer that was familiar with defending pilots. And please, ladies and gentlemen, when you talk to the lawyer, the number one reason lawyers get malpractice suits filed against them is failure to communicate with their client. I do know why, because I'm going to go back to 50% of us get divorced because we fail to communicate. But you know, hopefully you're not paying your spouse to be your spouse. You're paying this person to give you advocacy. So don't ever let them say, oh, I'm too busy right now, if they have already accepted you as a client. Don't. I mean, that is the number one reason that lawyers get sued by clients, is failure to communicate. You have to make them communicate. You may be too far into the case sometimes to change your lawyer, then go meet them in person and read them, you know, the Riot Act. You're paying for that representation. Now, I'm not saying, you know, go there with a baseball bat or anything, but certainly make sure that you understand what you're paying for. When you get, and if they should make you sign an engagement letter explaining their billing system, explaining how they charge for their time. I am always writing my lawyers pretty hard, and even Brett, to give me an explanation in that entry, the same way you do a maintenance entry. Give me enough detail that I know what the hell you did. That means give the client enough detail to understand what you did and how it impacted something that they asked for, like a letter. If I have to research advisory circulars to write you a letter, I write down the advisory circulars, pages, what have you. If the advisory circular ends up being against us, I put that in my notes and I'm not going to use it. I put it in my notes that, you know, that records my time for that period, so that I am fully telling you where I went. It also, I have directed some of my clients that if you want to do this yourself, because regulations are supposed to be understood by you, the person that is going to be enforced against, then get the knowledge that's necessary to fully understand when questioned, when to answer the question and when to keep your mouth shut. Because, you know, that famous quote, it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. The agency loves to leave you silences so that you'll fill them and possibly walk yourself into trouble. My conclusion is HAI's legal pages, I call them the website legal pages, gives you a lot of information on how to do your own research. Please take advantage of that. And hiring a lawyer is not something that should be done when you are feeling the full brunt of the emotion of what's happening, because there's a famous quote about divorce lawyers that when the couple sees red, the lawyer sees green. Don't. I call myself counselor at law, and I spend about half my time trying to talk my clients off the ceiling because they're angry about something. Go talk to your therapist about that. They're less expensive. Do we have any questions?
Actually, Sarah, today we don't have any questions yet from the audience, but I have a question related to hiring an attorney. You kind of went through the ideas of how to do it. The thought that came to my mind is the cost of an attorney. Who broaches that subject in a process, and how does it come into? Is it negotiable? Is it? And then you also mentioned, I think, billing options. How does that work for somebody who needs to hire an attorney?
Well, with us, we have a rate sheet, and I send it out, and you get 10% discount if you're an HAI member, and how I keep lawyer bills down. Okay, so I'm not going to avoid this question. Yes, everything is always negotiable. That's number one, right?
Okay.
You unfortunately are usually coming to a lawyer when you're in trouble. I always kid people about you never call a lawyer when you're having a good day, right? So if the lawyer says, you should be able to ask the lawyer. Now, remember, these aren't contingency fees suits that we're talking about, right? In a contingency fee, you will be asked to pay the expenses, but you don't have to pay fees if they don't win. That's this draw on contingency fees. But if court filings, you have to pay for the court filings. You have to pay for the depositions. You have to pay for the costs, the expenses. So if you don't understand what the guy's doing for you or why he needs to go interview this person or what have you, you're not involved in the case. And I'm not saying that you direct everything, because you do have to rely on the expertise. Number one, yes, negotiate the rate. Number two, do as much of it as you can yourself. We send you templates. Here, fill this out. We don't sign letters to the FAA because we're down here in the weeds. We respond to LOIs or letters of nonconformance and things like that. Not normal things. You usually hire ex-FAA inspectors to do the things we do. And talk about, paying a price. Do you pay for capitulation? Do you have somebody say, look, you don't have to do this because the regulation doesn't allow you to do it. Oh, Sarah, it's not going to cost us that much money. And 2 years later, you're coming back to me because it's cost you a fortune. You gotta be able to trust them to tell you how that's going to work out. If you're in a lawsuit and you're trying to sue somebody else, forget about it. The lawyer is going to make a lot of money.
Well,
when I handle civil penalty cases, Dan, I say, okay, I don't think I can negotiate this down any lower than you could, and you'll have to pay my fee. So why don't you let me help you get to the point where you can go in there and negotiate it? And clients go in, they CC me on the bottom of the ladder. So they know that they've got this behind them. And if they want help during an informal or what have you, I'll be there. But I work diligently with clients and really try to have a return on investment because I can teach them to fish during the incident. And I tell them that right up front. Look, I can teach you to fish, or I'll do the fishing for you. That's twice the price. Oh, Sarah, I don't want to worry about it. Okay, that's your choice, right? So lawsuits, you're going to pay by the hour. Lobbying, you're probably going to pay by the hour if that's what you're at, right? Contracts, writing one, reviewing one, those sorts of things. They shouldn't be handing it over. If you hire a partner and they're $700 an hour or $200 an hour and the associate is $100 an hour and they hand it over to the associate and the associate takes 4 times as long and the senior partner has to look at it anyway, those are the kind of bills that I question.
Well, and maybe that's a question that you would do during the interview process to determine how you want to select the person, whether you're comfortable with working with them.
Then the bigger the law firm, look around when you're sitting in the conference room because you're paying for all of the walnut.
Okay. Well, and to use your metaphor about divorce, what would be a process if all of a sudden, I mean, I don't think this could be something that would be a surprise to anybody or come up suddenly, but what happens if you just finally end up losing, I don't want to say lose faith with your attorney, but you're just not comfortable working with that firm anymore? What's the process there? Do they end up transferring the files that they've already developed over to the firm?
Almost every almost every state has ethics, right? And you can't hold your client's paperwork hostage. Even if the client, maybe this is only Virginia, but even if the client owes me money, I can't keep it hostage. If he says or she says, turn that stuff over to Joe Schlabotnik, I'm hiring another lawyer, that goes that day. And it's destroyed on my machines if it's electronic. Do you understand what I'm saying? No, you don't mess around. Now, you got to keep in mind it's the devil that you know. That's what the problem with humans is, right, Dan? Because if you hire a new lawyer and there's court deadlines, now you've got them under the gun to make up for all of the things. So if you start feeling uncomfortable with the lawyer, start asking colleagues about similar situations, or call another lawyer and say, I'm sorry, I don't know very many people in the United States that don't know a lawyer now. Shoot. But somebody knows a lawyer that you can talk to. And I have, you guys have referred me people I don't know anything about, but I can get them to the place that they can get their help. Now, again, most people are so emotionally beat up on some of these things that it's very hard for them to move on, right? But the sooner you do it, the better. Workman comp's cases, I don't know a damn thing about, and I don't know about it in any state. But again, you have to be your best advocate. You have to be. The health profession has taught us that, right? The government teaches that every day. So get the resources that you need. And then if you feel comfortable, the only way I feel comfortable with somebody is if they admit their shortcomings. I don't know anything about that. Let's go find somebody that does.
That's a great approach.
And if I don't know, remember, I got an ethical obligation as a lawyer not to take on a case that I don't know anything about. I don't get to learn off of the client. I hope that makes sense.
That seems completely reasonable. I believe there are some business owners on our webinar audience today, and we still have not received any questions. My assumption is that you would have at least a business-related lawyer, working with you as you first get started. Once you decide to focus on aviation, is it better to find somebody who specializes in aviation business law, just not necessarily even have on retainer, but to just make connections with in case you do need something down the road where you're not diving into the deep end without any help right off the bat?
Yeah, so what I have found is that small businessmen, usually go to local counsel, right? The local counsel should understand that they're a member of HAI and the resources that HAI has. They should understand even the legal directory in case they need an aviation-centric attorney, right? The attorneys shouldn't have any problem calling other attorneys. That old, the sharks in the water thing. There shouldn't be any problem with that. And you as the client can say, look, okay, in my opinion, you should always have an attorney in your back pocket when it comes to 14 CFR or 49 CFR, which is the commercial drivers, drug and alcohol, fitness requirements for the big boys, the 121s, etc. And of course, your major members, your manufacturers probably have a, as I call, a stable of lawyers. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have somebody that understands 14 CFR in that stable. In fact, I haven't found a big company that does, or even a big law firm, the 14 CFR down in the weeds that I deal with, which is the local aviation safety inspector, et cetera, right? I don't know very many lawyers that are down in the weeds in aviation. I trust me because I know what I don't know and I can go to somebody else. Oftentimes when a lawyer is in a big law firm, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say oftentimes. My experience is that lawyers in big law firms like to pile on the lawyers. I come into a meeting and there's 5 of them. And I came in by myself, you know what I'm saying? And going like, wait a minute. Are you all taking notes? You know, if it was, you know, contract 14 CFR, you know, hazmat, I can understand that, but you better introduce yourself that way. Again, when the big companies are also being very judicious about how they hire lawyers, and you got to promise some things like, you know, alternative billing. You can't bill for travel time. You can't, you know, they're cutting down on some of that fat.
That makes sense. We did get a comment from Mary, said, yes, engage a business attorney with aviation experience or an aviation attorney who can coordinate with a business attorney, even if they work in a large law firm with woodwork in their conference rooms.
Right. Well, and also remember that your tax people, you know, your accountant needs to be involved in some of this.
Absolutely.
I just watched the thing about, you know, the use of company airplanes by executives. Right. Hell, the SEC, if it's a public company, has your, you know, has you also. HR problems are going to come up, and they're going to be maybe being unique because they blew the whistle to OSHA or something like that on a safety matter, or they blew the whistle to the FAA on a safety matter. And now now you can't, quote unquote, fire them in some states. States have whistleblower protection. You know, I mean, employee law is fraught with, you know, stumbling blocks. So yeah, I really recommend a general, pragmatic lawyer. This is like the contracts. In law school, I took a class called The Death of Contracts, and I thought the reason that contracts are dead is because they're 50 pages long and nobody bloody reads them.
We just got another question, Sarah. Can you clarify the ARSAT org? I think they mean ARSA.
Yeah, ARSA. Yeah, Alpha Romeo Sierra Alpha.
And what that group does and how somebody can benefit from it.
Yeah, so, you know, we represent repair stations all over the world, repair stations, and as Brett says, approved maintenance organizations all over the world. My expertise has forced me into areas like 21, like this Mosaic law, the Mosaic thing that's coming out on restricted category. They're going to redefine aerial works yet again, and things like that. So we do a lot of advocacy with the FAA on policy and rulemaking. That's our real focus. My legislative bloke got the grant program going, as you know, Dan. He got everybody to sit down and get that $10 million a year for for technicians and pilots. So ARSA.org is where you go. Most importantly is that go to our training. There's a drop-down menu, and we have on-demand classes. And as HAI members, you can come in for ARSA member prices. Brett is probably listening very closely and can tell you the prices for members versus non-members. They're on demand. And so, get a number of people in the room and listen to it and take down because we give you the copy of the slides, we give you a copy of the resource guide, everything's hyperlinked, and you can do your own research on any of the subjects. We do have public aircraft. I think it's 3 classes, isn't it, Brett, on public aircraft?
Yeah, we have a 3-class package on public aircraft, which our normal sessions are $75 an hour for HAI members. But when you're purchasing a bundle or more than one, you get yourself a sweet discount. And we'd love to talk to you about even sponsoring new training. If you'd like to bring some new content into the world, we can help you do that.
I do want to clarify, that's not sweets discount.
Yeah, he did that on purpose, you know that, right? Brett is our champion of puns.
Well, we appreciate it. Sarah, I think we do need to wrap it up. We're up here near the top of the hour. As always, I'm grateful you've answered all the questions we had. You've answered all my questions, and I think that once again, you provided a very informative platform. Is there anything you want to finish with today?
I always tell people, just keep our number handy.
Show your business card, Sarah. Go to the next slide.
Oh, the business card. I gotta go to the business card. Wait a minute. Jeez.
Your phone number is on this slide, but I knew that the other slide was there too.
So, Dan, you said this was going to be up, and the gentleman will get an answer to his question. And if he's on, great, give us a shout. Here's the telephone number. You can find us also on the web. And use my mobile, please.
Oh, sounds good. Well, I will ask you to go ahead and stop sharing. I'll get ready to share because I need to do some wrap up here now. But thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Brett, for joining us again today. This has been another really, really informative period. You just can't overemphasize the need for an attorney in a legal matter. The value of having somebody like that to help advocate for your behalf when you're facing a room full of lawyers that's lined with woodwork. So, Sarah, thank you so much, and Brett, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and share screen and get things wrapped up here. Coming up, we have another webinar next week, 2 weeks from now on October 12th. Flight training and checking program with Helicopter Institute. That's a member benefit for HAI members. If you're having trouble keeping track of records, if you need somebody to help with the check ride, by all means, just come over and listen to this. We'll see if we can get some more information from you. I don't have firm dates for the next couple of topics, but I think I've got it locked in. Actually, the rotorcraft wake turbulence will be the first week in November. The end of October, it's still a little bit fluid. And I think the NASA Mars helicopter update will be on November 16th, which is kind of the off week. The second and fourth Thursdays are our normal time. The fourth Thursday of November is Thanksgiving. We will not make you watch a webinar on Thanksgiving Day here in the United States or literally anywhere else around the world. So we do hope you'll join us for that one. HAI does love to share news, information, provide information anybody can use. A couple great ways we do that is through Rotor Daily. That's a daily news aggregator. Roughly 45,000 people throughout the industry and around the world receive that. We go through the Google News, the press releases, a variety of sources so that you don't have to look for them. We send those to your inbox every day around noon Eastern. Usually between 10, 15, 20 stories of different topics related to vertical aviation. Some of them are fun, some of them are very informative, some of them might tell you what your competitors are up to. The other part we do is Rotor Magazine. It's a quarterly award-winning publication. We're going to have a very special edition coming up in December, celebrating HAI's 75th anniversary. It's going to be spectacular. We think it'll be one that might sit on a coffee table or in an FBO for a period of time. We know that people don't really care who was HAI's board chairman in 1964. So we want to celebrate the industry, and that's how we're looking at this issue of the magazine. We're focusing on where HAI helped get the industry where it is today, and probably talk a little bit about the future as well. So Both the Rotor Daily and Rotor Magazine are free. All you have to do is go to rotor.org/subscribe. There is a small charge for international mailing on Rotor Magazine. We probably will have a questionnaire follow-up to you soon. We'd appreciate it if you take a minute to fill it out. If you have questions for Jim Viola, please let him know what you think about how HAI is doing for membership organization. You know, if we could do better in one area, if we're doing great in an area, let us know that too. If you need individual assistance, HAI is actually pretty good about helping things regulatory or legislatively. Let us know how we can help. Through that email, president@rotor.org. That does wrap us up for today. I want to again thank Sarah and Brett for joining us. As always, Sarah has just a fantastic presentation and is usually wildly entertaining. I'll always enjoy when she comes on. And until 2 weeks from now, we do ask that you fly safe, you be safe, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Thank you.